Welcome to the Utu Na Uzalendo Podcast. My name is Mwalimu Mutemu Akiama, the host and the founder of Uzalendo Halisi Foundation. At Uzalendo Halisi Foundation, we are amplifying ordinary Kenyans doing extraordinary things. In this episode, we're featuring Wangu Kanja, the founder of Wangu Kanja Foundation and a champion against GBV and sexual violence. Tune in. Hi Wangu.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Utu Na Uzalendo Podcast.
Thank you.
Or vodcast. The vodcast is about telling stories of a different kind of Kenyan, or maybe the mainstream Kenyan, because the people who have captured our media spaces and conversation spaces are what I call charlatans, the corrupt, those guys who really don't care about the society. They don't dignify Kenyans. And there's this feeling that Kenyans, there's this, we are helpless, we are a corrupt society, and we want to show that there's a different side of this country, who are the majority actually, but rarely get their stories told. So it's Kenyans who work with communities, mostly because of a sense of empathy. Don't work for money. They don't start doing what eventually they get money out of the work that they do, but that's not their motivation. And it's an effort to tell a different story about our country and to amplify those who do good in our society and put them on a platform. So the Utu Na Uzalendo podcast is a series of podcasts. Hopefully we'll be able to feature one such person every week for the next 1 or 2 years. And hopefully we'll also show Kenyans a different side of the people who are called activists, of which I am one of them. So karibu sana.
Asante.
Maybe you could start by introducing yourself. Who's Wangu? Where were you born? Where did you go to school? And any other way you'd like to introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me. My name is Wangu Kanja. I'm the firstborn in a family of 5. I was born, brought up, and bred in Nairobi. And
which side of Nairobi?
I was born in Kangemi, but then we moved to Umoja, Buruburu and Umoja. And then my mom and dad moved to Mihango. So that's where they are right now. I was brought up like an independent child. Most of the time I thrive to do stuff for myself. Where, when you're going to school, because I went to school in Nairobi and Nyeri, when you're given pocket money, you save so that at the end of the school term, you can come back home and buy for yourself stuff, nguo, shoes, and then also I've always wanted to do something for the community, especially when I was in primary school. I would go and volunteer at Aga Khan Hospital to see how best I can offer my services back to the community. So I didn't start doing what I'm doing now just because there's something to gain out of it. But then it was, let me say it's a calling. And I leveraged on it. And for me, it's how do I give something to the community? and that's the way my parents brought us, because we would, most of the time when people have house managers in the house, kazi yao ni kukula huko kwa kitchen. So my dad would ask us, all of us, to come sit together, serve food, and we shouldn't discriminate anyone. So I think that was cultivated mapema sana.
You have how many boys and how many girls?
We only have one. My dad had one son and then four daughters. Yeah.
And what did your dad do and your mom?
My mom was a housewife, but then my dad was an accountant, working for one of the oil companies in Kenya. But now he passed on 3 years ago. He had cancer, and then he just took a toll of
How
him.
old was he when?
I think he was in his around 75. Yeah.
Okay. So you did primary in Nairobi, then high school in
Nyeri. Yeah.
Which
and
school
Murang'a.
did you go to in?
I went Nairobi was Unity Primary School. Nyeri was Mary Immaculate Secondary, and then Gitito Secondary School. Yeah.
You high school or just 844?
844.
844.
Yeah.
Okay. How was the experience between growing up in Nairobi and then going to a school in the village?
It was traumatizing because at some point when I was taken to Mary Immaculate, it was a Catholic high school, and they were very strict, and then the way they handled the students, for me it was something that I've never interacted with. And then also my dad would talk to us. When you do a wrong, my dad would call you and have a conversation. On that other end, they would whip the hell out of you. I found that different, but then also the engagement, it's I say you do, you don't ask questions. And then church was like every morning and every evening. And for me, I think we need to just give people room for them to choose what is good for them, even as a child.
There is the era of capital punishment in schools.
Yeah. So it was difficult. And then while I was in Mary Immaculate, it got so bad. I just told my dad, "Apana, this one, if you want for me to continue going to school, you change me the school." So even when I would pray day and night for my dad to come and remove me from that school. And the day it happened, I was like, tusibebe vitu vile tu twende, because I don't want even to go back and pack. That's how I moved now to Getito.
Were the sisters African or white in that school?
No, they were sisters, but it was they were Africans.
They were African.
Yeah. So for me, it's just, I think we don't, when it comes to either parenting or handling children, we don't take a keen interest on how to engage, because I think that's where the formative years of how to engage with someone help them see that even having information would actually help you make an informed decision. And when you use corporal punishment, you only make that person be defiant.
Yeah, it's corporal, not capital. I called it capital punishment. It's a corporal punishment. Yeah.
You make that person defiant, because I think my dad's approach of having a conversation and helping people to understand, so you did a wrong, because he would come and ask, so and so has wronged. He calls you and asks you, so what did you do wrong? How do you know it's wrong? And then also, what kind of punishment do you want me to give you because you've committed that wrong? So you see, he would help you understand why that thing is a wrong. Yeah.
And maybe that could point out to, because of our colonial legacy.
Yeah.
Schools are more like like prisons. Our parents would take us to school ostensibly to get an education, but then I think the colonial legacy was that Africans were difficult people. They need to be shaped, hammered and shaped into obedient, non-questioning people, and then who can work for the then colonialists to serve, maybe because education then was for you to serve in the colonial administration as clerks, as supervisors, as colonial officers, administration officers, and you needed to be shaped in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I guess that also permeated to most, in terms of governing schools. How do you treat kids? How do you mold them? How do you hammer their individuality, their personalities out of them and make them uniform? Even wearing uniform, and I guess that's what school is traumatizing. To a lot of people.
It is. But then also, for us, when you go to school, it's like mass production of a certain kind of workers, and then they don't help you to think outside the box in terms of.
You're not supposed to think. You're supposed to just regurgitate stuff.
So if you think outside the box, everyone reprimands you or will think that you're doing a wrong. So how do we help people? Because I don't like the fact that we are reducing our youth to watu wanafanya kazi ya mkono. You're not helping them think and also investing in their future.
I think Sakaja has just employed 2,000 youth to clean up Nairobi.
Yeah.
What's your view on
And
that?
for me it's hatuwezi kuwa tunafanya kazi kwa vijana na pesa kwa wazee. That's a wrong model. We need to create I think a while back we had sort of like putting up warehouses and looking at how do we help the youth set up startup ventures and help and nurture that talent to get to a point where we become like a Silicon Valley of some sort in Africa. So the more we keep on emphasizing that ni kazi kwa vijana, pesa kwa wazee, because when you tell young people the only good thing they are for is manual labor, then you're denying them the opportunity to grow.
And now you're seeing even university education is becoming unaffordable to most Kenyans, Kenyans of average income.
Yeah, and for me it's, why don't we go back and evaluate the structures that we are putting in place to set a precedent where people feel that they are worthy of. Not unless you're a self-driven person, you might not get to where you want to be if you don't have someone to nurture you in that direction. Assume a Kenya where we have this big warehouse where you're bringing young people who want to build either cars, build computers, come up with the likes of other M-Pesa ventures.
AI, robotics.
Yeah, AI. And the world is like, we are evolving very fast. And at some point, I think we are playing catch up as Kenya. So how do we create that environment for the youth? And then also not rely on only content creation. For example, why are we telling our youth the only thing that you can be good for is content creation? Instead of AI is here. So what can you do with AI in terms of collecting data, analyzing that data, informing some of the country interventions that we want to address? Climate change,
It's that thing of youth being there to be seen rather than to be heard. They are put there as props in spaces rather than actually being part of, to use the word, maybe co-creation or imagining in terms of even what jobs they want, because it's like our youth can't think. We kind of see them as people who can't contribute, can't think through what kind of solutions our country can have for them.
So let me give you an example of one of the things that slowly people are trying to align themselves to. So when we're addressing sexual violence, survivors were not part of the conversation. People would come up with interventions and say, one size fits all, let's implement. The same thing happened when we were addressing HIV and AIDS. So the people affected were not part of the conversation. So we would make decisions and say, you implement, without getting the views of the people who've been affected. But then increasingly, we are saying meaningful engagement. And meaningful engagement means you need to bring the people to the table. And once they are at the table, you hear what they have to say, so that even when you're developing interventions or whatever structures that you're putting, whether it's community or governance, you have listened to the Kenyans. And the reason why I'm saying that is you will make a decision and impose that decision on the people, but then at some point, people don't buy into it.
They don't own, they don't take
Yeah,
ownership.
they don't own the process. And if they don't own the process, what does that do? They will work against the intervention, or they will not uptake the interventions that you've put in place. And for me, it's critical that you listen. If someone is telling you, this is how we view this thing and this is how it's going to affect us, listen to them, because they are on the ground and they are actually feeling either the pinch or the impact of whatever decision that you are making at the top.
And I guess that's that is reflected in most of our spaces. Jobs for young people, education for Kenyans. I think CBC is a British curriculum. It's developed by the British Council, who really don't have the nuance of Kenyans. Whatever their purpose for pushing the education system, there was no public participation. Kenyans did not contribute. We have education experts who are not involved in the development of that. And I guess what you're pointing out, and we are going into the deeper conversation around the work that you do. It's the traumas. For example, when I was growing up, if you asked questions in class or did not confirm, if the teacher told you this is the thing, and you did not regurgitate what the teacher said, you are considered truant or hard-headed or ultimately deviant. And they even had schools for what are called in Kikuyu. They used to be called reform schools. In Kikuyu, they used to be called Wamomo. And Wamomo means hard, where you take the hard-headed people. And those schools were kind of prisons. So they were actually, the thinkers, as you're calling them, would be taken to those schools, because it's the thinkers who question. Teacher, you've said this, or mom, you've said this, or dad, you've said this, but I think this could be the alternative view of this. And then you're told you're kichwa ngumu, and you're taken to...
Yeah.
And I think we've come from that perspective of don't question, don't think, just follow.
Yeah, but then also, even as we allow people to think, there are different lenses that we use. A human rights lens, a gender lens, a finance lens. So help people to look at things with a 360 kind of view, so that you incorporate the disadvantaged, you incorporate the people who've been affected, you incorporate policymakers, and at the end of the day, the intervention is more either people-centered or whatever community you want to develop the intervention for becomes the center of that conversation. And I think we are borrowing too much from Europe, and we are unable to domesticate some of the things that we are borrowing, because you can't borrow exactly as it is and bring it to Kenya and you expect it to work. So for us, it's borrow best practices, but then contextualize it, because culture, tradition, religion is different in every geographical area you go to. So you can't just say, let's do an education reform and then borrow from Europe as it is and then expect it to work in Kenya. Because also the social economic status of Kenyans is totally different from what we have in Europe. The infrastructure is totally different. The investment on education, health is totally different, and it differs from one country to the other. Even between Kenya and Uganda or Kenya and Tanzania, the situation is different. The context is different.
And even communities.
Yeah, the
Nairobi, rural communities, very different.
So we need to break it down further and say, so let's borrow this because it might work for Kenya. Let's not borrow this because then we are not there yet. If you look at even the use of technology, how many people in Kenya can access a smartphone? How many companies are actually relying on technology and innovation to address some of the challenges that we are having as a country? So for us, can we create a safe environment for Kenyans first to be able to think outside the box so that they can be innovative and leverage on technology and other avenues so that we can push whatever agenda, whether it's a health agenda, a security agenda, to be able to facilitate those conversations. And for me, if you talk to children, if you talk to the youth, if you talk to vulnerable groups, they will give you solutions. The only thing is, are we giving them that opportunity? When we are saying public participation, like, are we listening to them? Because I know instances where people have had raised a concern, but then the political outfit are not listening.
They just want to rubber stamp things.
So we did public participation, move on.
And I think that's the purpose of devolution. It was supposed to actually take the solution finding to the communities, because the communities, as you say, the one who wears the shoe is the one who knows where it pinches. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Tell us about Wangu Kanja Foundation. What is it about? What work do you do? Why do you do it?
So Wangu Kanja Foundation is an institution that is working towards amplifying survivors' voices. And the reason why we
What do you mean by survivors?
So we focus on addressing sexual violence in Kenya, looking at prevention, protection, and response. And our main target audience or our beneficiaries are survivors of sexual violence. And the reason why we are amplifying their voices, going back to, are we allowing the people who have been affected by an issue to come to the table and discuss what pertains them, and also become part of the process of developing interventions that work for them. Because you can't say, we have this intervention, we are going to make sure that we are implementing it to serve all the survivors. We have survivors of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual violence, trafficking. So you can't lump them up and say one size fits all, because their experiences are totally different. And for you to be able to have interventions that work for each and every single group, you have to listen to them. And then you don't bring them together, because also the way they view each other is different. My issue is not serious than yours. Yours, maybe it's more because you're trafficked, then you had more challenges than I.
If you could maybe like highlight each of those, the categories that you've you've mentioned of sexual violence, just briefly?
So when we are referring to survivors of sexual violence, let's start with breaking down sexual violence as, so we have individuals who went through sexual violence during childhood, peacetime, conflict, because they do sex work, because they are from the LGBTQ community. There are those who went through sexual violence after being trafficked for sexual exploitation. So you have different categories of people. And then also we have people who are going through physical abuse in a domestic setup, or in a relationship, you're going also through a violation. So those people experience the violation differently. So if a person was trafficked for sexual exploitation and a person who went through sexual violence during childhood, the experiences are different. So you can't say the same intervention would work for the both of them. You have to develop the different interventions for them. Even when it comes to protection, like putting them in safe spaces, you can't put them together. You have to identify two separate spaces where both of them can start their healing journey, rehabilitation, and a program that is meant for a survivor of childhood is totally different from trafficking.
Elaborate a bit about trafficking. How does it manifest, like in Kenya, you know?
Most of the incidences that we have seen are very subtle. So you traffic someone from their rural home to Nairobi in search of work, and then when they get here, maybe the work, whatever he or she was promised, cannot be available at that particular time. So you find that they might get themselves into situations where they're being sexually exploited, or
for survival.
Yeah, for survival, but also for other people to make money. There are incidences where a person might be trafficked for work, and then they are coming for domestic work, and they get the employment, but then now they're being subjected to different violations at the domestic setup, whether it's a house or an office, because violations vary depending on the environment or the person who's perpetuating it. And then also you will find there are people who either are being trafficked from one country to another for sexual exploitation, for them to work in brothels or any other space that the people who are trafficking them have set up to make money through them. So the context is different.
And I'm asking this because of the issue of the Middle East. Some of the Kenyans who go work, usually they sign on to go and do domestic, to be domestic workers.
Yeah.
Is there this part of that kind of setup?
Yeah. So we have people who, and okay, we need to be careful. We don't generalize. There are instances where a person will be trafficked to the Middle East for sexual exploitation, because channels are different. There are those genuine companies or institutions that are actually helping people to look for employment. But then there are those people who, for them, is to exploit people, and they will traffic you so that they can use you to sexually exploit you so that they can make money. We've seen incidences. Under Wangu Kanja Foundation, we've handled 2 cases where we had, I can't remember because it was a while back. I think she was 27 and she went there in search of work. But then when she got to the other end, her documentation were taken away, and then she was put up in this house where the members of the family were taking advantage of her, they were sexually exploiting her, and then also denying her basics, food, water, and that's how do you determine the quality of life? Even when you're going in search of work, you need to determine the quality of life that person has in their working environment. So even as we are talking about sexual violence, we need to look at the different factors to ensure that that person is having the quality of life that is expected for them as an individual, from a human rights angle, a women rights angle, even as a human being. Yeah.
There was this story just I think 2 or 3 days ago about this man in Moranga who was sentenced to 10 years jail for sexually violating his spouse, and then 25 years for brutalizing her, for beating her up before that sexual violation. I don't know whether the sentences are running concurrent. When I posted it on Facebook, there were all manner of reactions. Of course, there are those who are like, he deserved it. Finally, we are getting justice for victims of sexual violence, like marital violence.
Yeah.
Or you call it partner
Intimate partner
violence. Have there been such judgment before? Or is it like a precedent-setting case? I think it was in Moranga.
No, we have a number that has number of judgments and rulings that have set precedent. But then, as a country, we need to ask ourselves difficult questions or have a candid conversation. And the reason why I'm saying that is, why are we allowing individuals who are committing heinous crimes not to be held accountable? And the reason why I'm saying not to be held accountable is the infrastructure or the mechanisms they're not accommodative enough for survivors to be able to support them to access justice. And it starts with like very simple things. If I come to you and report, and then you're not empathetic, your line of questioning is very wanting. Where were you? Why were you there at that particular time? You are a married woman. What would you be doing someone's office at that particular time? And then for children, she looked like an adult. She's the one who actually approached me. And the laws are very clear. The laws of Kenya are very clear that children are people between 0 to 18. And they cannot consent. So even you as a mature adult, why are you rationalizing that the child actually approached you and seduced you? 10-year-old, 9-year-old, 4-year-old, how can they seduce you?
And I think that points to perversion, sexual perversion. So and in most of these cases, it's actually men who take advantage of young girls, young kids. Although also boys are increasingly also being raped by men mostly.
Kiama, this is one of the thing that saddens me when we have media houses having such discussions and not conclusively calling out the perpetrators and saying this is wrong. And we reduce these conversations to mockery or even making it seem to be like a non-issue. And, small things that nuance to, yo si kitu kubwa. See, women do that.
I've heard of people being laughed at police stations where they go to report violations.
Yeah.
Both men and women. What is your experience with victims, such victims, survivors, let's say?
You see, anyone can be violated, man, woman, or child. It doesn't matter whether you are from which community, which tribe, which religion, which you practice whatever cultural practices. Anyone can be a victim. So we downplay the violation because you see, around sexual violence, it's about consent. Did I consent to have sexual relationships with you. But then also, if I agreed, I can withdraw my consent. Can we get to a point where we respect each other as human beings? And when a person says no, it's a no. Even if we are in bed and we are naked and the person withdraws, whether the man withdraws the consent or the woman withdraws the consent, you actually respect the consent, the withdrawal of the consent, and say, fine, let's not do it. But you will find people pushing the boundaries and saying, you can't say yes and then a minute later you say no. Because all of us have gone through childhood traumas that inform the way we react, the way we interact with people, the way we engage with people. So at some point, something might have triggered you and you decided to withdraw the consent, or you just feel that you're not comfortable and you've withdrawn consent. People should respect that. Because you see, the reason why such violations happen is that the person who's committing the crime does not respect the rule of law or even your right as a human being. The other one is gender inequalities. Because of either your social economic status, fish for, what do you call it? Pads for, there's an issue around pads, there's an issue around
in
fish.
Fish for sex.
And then also pads for sex, fish for sex, fish, education, sex for education. You'll find, because of people being in a different
so someone in a position of power then uses that power to force a sexual relationship.
Force or manipulate for you to have sex with them so that they can give you what you don't have. That's by itself is a violation because there is a power dynamic. And then that's now the third one, the power relations. Do I have power over you? And then how am I using that power? Because also people in power can abuse their employees, children, their significant other. And power is not about mimi ni mkubwa kukushinda. It's about even also monetary. I have more money than you. I'm a manager in a certain institution, and this is what I'm asking you to do so that I can give you promotion. And they're very subtle ways people can abuse their power, but then we don't talk about them. And because we don't talk about them, when you come out and speak about it, people are like, what do you mean? It has been the norm. So deal with it and move on.
Actually, that's the other thing. It's the normalization of I think in our society of sexual violations, and especially men taking advantage. I think there's a reason the law says you cannot make a competent decision if you're below a certain age in terms of engaging in sexual matters, and leaves it to, is it age of consent is 16 or 18? 18,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but then also even when you're in a frame of mind, for example, when you're drunk, you cannot give consent. And being drunk does not mean you have the right to have sexual intercourse with anyone. That by itself is a crime. People who have different conditions, like for example, an elderly person who's bedridden, when you have any sexual intercourse with them, because they are incapacitated, then you are violating them. The issue of people who are mentally, they don't have the capacity to actually give you the right because they have a condition or they're not in a frame of mind to give the consent. So we look at the context. Who's the person who was violated, under what circumstances, and then we need to address it as it is. Because increasingly, we've focused too much on children, we are forgetting adults. And then anything related to adults has become an issue. And that normalizes the violation. So we need to come out strongly as a country and say, as Kenyans, even the government should, and I don't understand how we have a government that does not protect its citizen. And these are the same individuals that will come back to and you'll ask them to vote for you. So if you're not protecting women, why are you coming to women to tell them to vote for you? If you're not protecting men, why are you telling?
The president appointed someone in his cabinet who has multiple cases on issues of sexual violence.
Yeah. So why are we normalizing? Because that's normalizing by saying integrity is not a core value that we uphold as a country. So why are we giving power to people who have violated other people's rights, who've committed other crimes? Why are we giving people power? And we know very well that because they have integrity issues, there's a likelihood they're going to commit the same crime or continue violating other people the same way. Why are we not calling them out? Why are we not holding them accountable? Because we have mechanisms that can hold these people accountable. Why are we not telling them to step down? For example, the other day, Sankok was marketing his lodge, and he said, muleta wala watu wanakula fare. I have a house where kuna ngazi, and when you remove the ngazi, the person has to do what you ask them to do because they don't have a choice. You're actually rationalizing.
Rationalizing and glorifying
violence,
because that's now marketing. He's marketing his place in terms of you can come and rape somebody here.
Yeah. So why are we not calling such people out? Why, as a community, as a country, have we been so desensitized to a point where we are afraid to call people out and say and call things for what it is? If you're advocating for people to be raped, there's something wrong with you, and you, as a person, you might at one point or the other committed a similar offense. And that's the reason.
He's speaking from experience.
Yeah.
Ideally.
And then also, no one held you accountable.
And now the society that then laughs at that and shares it on Facebook and Twitter. And
becomes a joke of the day, memes, move on.
So I'm going to ask you a sensitive, like, why do you do what you do? Why sexual violence? Why not any other advocacy field?
Okay, so you remember when Ali mentioned when I was in primary school, I wanted to help community. So this particular time, we were carjacked, and then I went through rape.
How old were you?
I was in my 20s, somewhere in my 20s.
And where did this happen?
Eastland, Uhuru. After going through the rape ordeal, the challenges, because the way your family looks at you, the way your friends look at you, the way the community looks at you, the questions they ask you, and you're like, okay, it was a carjacking incident. I was raped at gunpoint. Why are you asking me these questions? That's like I called it upon myself to get raped. It's
victimizing you for.
Yeah. So there's a lot of victim blaming, victim shaming for something that they did not call upon themselves to happen to them. And then at that particular time, we didn't have too many institutions providing medical health and also mental health services for survivors of sexual violence. So the challenges that I went through at that particular time informed the setting up of Wangu Kanja Foundation, so that we amplify the survivors' voices, what they are going through, what needs to be put in place to make sure that the services are more survivor-centered, trauma-informed, in the best interest of the survivor. Because most of the time, you'll find people asking questions for their own benefit. It's not about the individual. You're not trying to help the individual. For you, So the other day, someone asked me, because of my ordeal, whether I'm married. And I was like, okay, so what's the correlation? Getting married is a personal decision. Whether I went through the ordeal or not, getting married is a personal decision at the end of the day. And also, not everyone was meant to get married. So there are certain things that people do that shame the victim or the survivor, blame the victim. And in the process, you will find, because we do that frequently, the people who are affected tend to keep quiet. And when they keep quiet, it means that they are not able to access support services to help start their healing journey or the rehabilitation process. And going back to, I think, yesterday or today, NACADA released a report that 90% of Kenyans have started, there's an increase in use of marijuana. So for me, what is the underlying problem? Yes, we are saying there's a 90% increase, or 90% of Kenyans are using, whether it's even alcohol. Why are we not interrogating what's the underlying problem? Because you might find that there are people who are dealing with childhood traumas. There are people who are dealing with different forms of sexual violence that happen to them, but they don't know how to cope or how to project or how to seek support. And then also because the community is not accommodative of them, so they look for coping mechanisms. So you're using alcohol, what might be the problem? You're promiscuous, what might be the problem? You're a person who looks for other coping mechanism, what's the problem? Because anyone who's using a coping mechanism, there is an underlying problem that you need to address. And it's a process. It's not a one day. Because for me, it took 12 years.
How was that process? Because as you said, you didn't have institutions like Wangu Kanja Foundation that now is specific to trying and helping survivors.
Yeah.
How was the process for you as a survivor to get to where you are today?
Okay, one, it's even right now for others, it's still tough because one, families don't understand the violation, and also they don't understand the issues and the consequences that come with the violation. We tend to shift the blame to the person who has been violated and not shine the light on the perpetrator. So it still happens to date. And by doing so, what that translates to is it becomes hard for me to even come out and speak out, because then people will label you, ule msichana alirepiwa ama ule mama alirepiwa.
Brave about you, because you advocate about this every other time, and like, I'm sure every time you're doing it, you're reliving that experience. How did you manage to get to that point?
I had to go through two processes. So one, I met this group of individuals. Right now, they are my friends because we've walked the journey with them. And they took me through coaching sessions for 2 years. 2 years on personalizing everything that I was to do in my life, in terms of who's Wangu, where does Wangu want to be, what are some of the challenges Wangu is going through, where do you want to be in the next 5 years. And then that helped me now to start thinking about the violation. How did the violation affect me as an individual? Because then at that particular time, immediately when the ordeal happened, I used alcohol as a coping mechanism for 2.5 years. And it takes you on a on a trajectory that you as an individual, you get to a point where you cannot even identify you as an individual, who you are, what are your values, what do you believe in. For you to be able now to come back to your new normal, you have to go through a process. So the 2 years of coaching got me to a point where I was sober enough.
This coaching started after at that point where your life had spiraled.
No, it happened 5 years later, because that's in 5 or 6 years later. That's in 2013. 2012, 2013, 2014.
So for this after the 2.5 years of alcohol use, abuse, you started getting out on your own, and then now go to the coaching.
So that actually, it got to a point where I was sitting somewhere having my drink, and I just realized I don't know this Wangu. And then, the way you have a still voice that tells you, hey, Wangu, this, you have to change. One way or the other, you have to change. So from there, I was like, okay, so what do I need to change? And at that particular time, there was a newspaper. So when I was browsing through the newspaper, I saw an advert, a money counseling center. They offer like certificate counseling. So I was like, maybe this is where to start. So I joined a money counseling center, did 2 certificates, and during that process, you have to do 30 hours of counseling. And that's where now I started addressing some of the challenges that I was facing. So, and the most difficult thing is to acknowledge that it happened to you, but then now you have to move past it. And by moving past it, you have to like release this person, and say you've forgiven them, or you have released them for you, not for them, and for you to start your healing journey. You know the saying where people say you hold grudges. It's like drinking poison, expecting the other person to die. So that's where I was, where I was very resentful of the people who violated me, to a point where my life went on a pause. So I had to get to a point where I released them and said, I'm doing this for me, and I'm claiming my dignity back, because by having gone through the violation, the people had taken my dignity away. And also even individuals, family, friends who do not support you and who ask you those victim shaming question, victim blaming questions, also take away your dignity, because they're not helping you to claim back your dignity. So when I released the individuals, I said, I'm doing this for me. That's when I was like, how many other women and children, boys and girls or men, are going through the same, but they're unable to access support services? Because I come from a middle bracket family. I was able to access medical counseling. We had people who would give us information. I was able to access information from different mediums. And by doing that, I would make informed decisions. So for me, it was clear that the thing that I wanted to do when I was in primary school, to help people or fight for some kind of right, this was an opportunity that I would actually take advantage of and set up Wangu Kanja Foundation.
You reframed the violation to be kind of a calling, like an opportunity for you. You found your purpose out of that violation.
Yeah, and I think that by itself, it continuously helps for me to address some of the unresolved issues that I might have. But then right now I've integrated the ordeal into my day-to-day life, because you can't erase it completely from your life. You have to integrate it and move forward one day at a time. Because I keep on telling and encouraging all survivors, just do you one day at a time. Even if it's 1 minute, 5 minutes, 1 hour, 10 hours, one day at a time, an hour, a second at a time, then your life will improve over time. Because we have fear, and I think it emanates from socialization, the way we were, the life experience we got from school. So you have a lot of fear on how people will view you. So most of the decisions, the decisions that we make is about other people and not. So how is Kiama going to look at me? How is Kiama going to judge me? If I tell Kiama, what will Kiama tell me? So at the end of the day, it's about other people. So you have to make it about you. You're the one who's hurting.
What is best for
what's best for me as an individual. And then moving forward, look for support mechanisms that will get you to that point that you want to be in.
I think we have a society that is that has socialized us to be outward looking in terms of getting approvals from others, such that we project, we do a lot of things to get approval rather than what is best for us.
I think self-validation is the best thing. Approve you. Don't seek external validation, because external validation, you're going to be doing things for other people, and other people's expectations are not your expectations. For example, in our day-to-day life, we expect men to provide 24/7, 365. That's unrealistic. Then you put men in this trajectory where they're under so much pressure. And then having been socialized that mwanaume ni effort, mwanaume ali, you bottle up so many things. And then one day, out of nowhere, you kill your significant other and people are like, we didn't know he was that kind of a person. Yet, society is expecting you to do a lot, but they're not giving you a formula. Your family is expecting a lot from you, either man or woman, because nowadays they expect a lot from both sexes, for you to do something for them. But they're not helping you. They're not giving you a formula for you to get to that level where you are able to be financially independent. You are able to invest. They're the ones who are trying to pull you down. If you make a decision, nasema sasa muangalie, bala kwenda vile kila mtu mwingine kwa familia ameenda njia zake, and all of us, we cannot be the same.
So you're pointing out to maybe an issue that we really don't think, the economic aspect of that leads to this kind of abuses. The either again, it's a power dynamic. Someone has more, someone doesn't have. Someone is trying to get rent or school fees or whatever, and they find themselves in a compromising situation. And I think as a society, we don't address these issues.
Because it goes back to if you're financially able, man or woman, I have power to control you. Or if as a woman, if I'm doing well and then my boyfriend or my partner is not doing well, they might end up using violence to make me submit to them. So we don't look at those issues as is, because we tend to rationalize. So for example, if my mom went through domestic violence, there is a likelihood, if we don't address it as a family, we don't go through counseling, there's a likelihood it happening, either to me or one of my siblings. And then also, we don't see the impact of that violation on the children that are in that family, because it has an impact. Let's not deny that it does. That it doesn't. It has an impact. Either we acknowledge and address it, or we sweep it under the carpet and it continues. That's why we have the cycle of violence, first generation, second generation, third generation. So if we want the cycle of violence to be broken, we have to address it, and we have to consciously take steps towards ensuring that we are able to address it to conclusion. Why are people subjecting each other to either domestic violence or sexual violence? It might have happened to them, and that's how they are projecting to others. Boundaries. How are you teaching your girls and boys or your children in your home to respect people's boundaries? Because there are people who push other people's boundaries to a point where it now gets out of hand and becomes a violation. Right now, we are having high cost of living. What does that translate to a household? The man might go out there, he might not get work, so he's frustrated. Where does he bring his frustration? Back to the house. If someone says something, even maybe it's the child, the person might flare up, and it becomes that he's now beating up everyone. If a woman is going in search of work and they're unable to find that work, how does it project back into the family or even to other people, their friends? Or how is that person coping with the stressors? Because it boils down to you as an individual. How are you able to handle your stressors? If you're stressed out, do you come and flare up in your family or in your house and beat everyone up or subject people to sexual violence? Because a while back, it was unfortunate that we handled a case where the husband would abuse the wife. His, I think, 4 children every single time, sexually, not physically. So if
boys and girls?
Both boys and girls. So, and he would do that especially when he's frustrated or under influence of drugs. And eventually, we tried supporting the woman to come out of the relationship as we take them through a rehabilitation, but then also it's a personal decision. So the best thing we did is to remove the children from that context. The woman was so distraught and disturbed to a point where she was always like in a daze. And for that person to go to rehabilitation, you have to put in a lot of investment, time, finances, and expertise. And that's why we call for like prevention.
What kind of programs do you have at Wangu Kanja Foundation that deal with all these myriad of issues? Are there also other government interventions to address the same?
Yeah, we've made milestones as a country. We have the Sexual Offences Act, and we have other like 24 laws that in one way or the other provide to address sexual violence, whether it's online, whether it's offline, in the domestic setup, sexual harassment policies in companies. We have the structure. The only challenge that we face is the investment to fully implement, and then also enforce the laws. Because if you do not invest in the structures, then how are you facilitating survivors to be able to access services? If you're not able to to invest in medication, how are you providing medical for survivors? So the first thing we do is do
as Wangu Kanja, no?
Yeah, as an organization is to do a needs assessment if a person calls us or comes to our office. And once we've done the needs assessment, if the person has not gone to hospital, then we liaise with both private and public facilities that offer post-rape care services. And also at our offices, we have a psychologist. And if we are overwhelmed, we reach out to other organizations like the likes of Kenya Red Cross, CRU, to facilitate offering mental health services to survivors of sexual violence. Legal aid. We give legal advice to survivors, because also managing expectations. Everyone thinks if we go to court, it's abracadabra and we are sorted. It's a process.
And these cases take forever.
Yeah. So helping the survivor understand and also manage expectation. We are not going to walk into a court and then come out with a win. It's going to be a process. So helping them to understand what needs to be done, how long it might take, and then also the disadvantages of not holding someone accountable. Because people are afraid of, or the right thing would be saying that people don't trust the system. And because they don't trust the system, then they don't want to engage it. And because they don't want to engage it, then we are not holding the perpetrators accountable. And then what that translates to, that person feels that it's the right thing that they've done because we've not held them accountable. So they become repeat offenders of serial rapists in the process. That's why I'm insisting, can we create a safe environment for people to feel that, one, they can come out and speak about their ordeal, but then also the criminal justice system, they can trust the criminal justice system that it's going to work for them and they are going to be able to access justice. And for Kenya, we've committed resources, like under the Generation Equality Forum. Kenya committed, I think, 25 billion Kenya shillings. But then we ask, where is the money? Where is it going to? Huh?
How long ago was that?
It was during Uhuru's term.
First term, second term?
I think it was first term. It
was meant to go to address some of these issues.
Yeah, one of because Kenya is a co-chair. I think it was then a co-chair with Canada to address gender-based violence. And because they were co-chairing, that's how they ended up committing the 25 billion to address gender-based violence. But then, where is the money? Intended purpose? Was it towards prevention, protection, or response? Is it under health? Is it under security? Is it under justice? So we are not quite sure where the money was supposed to be directed.
25 billion can just disappear into. Was the money actually allocated, or was it just a declaration? I don't say declaration.
I'm not quite sure whether it was just a declaration and the money was not there, or we have the money but then we were not told where the money is going to be directed to. But then also, that's also something that we need Kenyans to come out and hold the government of the day accountable. So if we are saying we are addressing gender-based violence and you've committed to address gender-based violence, so where is the investment? Where are the structures? Where is the personnel? And where is the financial investment? Because you can't do one.
Sensitization, like a public campaign, awareness creation by government, by either security or health departments. I don't think I've seen anything on that line.
So we've not been able to do an all-year-round campaign that is government-led. And I recommend we do what we did. You remember when Kibaki did the campaign around HIV and AIDS, pamoja tuangamize ukimwi. Take a similar approach and come out clearly as a president, as a country, and say we are not going to be a society that actually justifies, rationalizes, or condones any form of violence, especially on an individual, a Kenyan, who's a voter, who's a taxpayer, because then if we are not able to do that, then what we are saying is we do not hold citizens in the highest esteem of
with dignity,
and also acknowledging at the end of the day that the people who are giving you that power to be in that seat. So if we are not able to do that, then why do we have the government?
And part of the purpose of this podcast is about centering Utu or Ubuntu, the person, the Kenyan. There's a lot of talk about building Kenya rather than building Kenyans. And I think any government that does not care about the individual citizen and their well-being, including mental health, physical health, having a healthy citizenry that can then be productive.
Yeah.
I think, in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, access to security, personal and community. I think part of what we want to do is center that, so that we can start having that conversation of how do we address some of these issues that face Kenyans as individuals. And I'm grateful that you brought that out. I remember my personal journey into issues of trauma, which is something most of us are not aware. But right now there's that conversation. But when I was growing up, that was not an issue. We didn't even have counselors and psychologists. But I remember one of the most prominent psychologists at that time. I don't know if there's a psychologist or psychiatrist. I don't know what the difference is between the two. What is the difference?
One uses medication, the other one uses talk.
So who's a psychologist? Who's a psychiatrist?
Psychologists use reflection talk.
Okay.
Like they talk to you and then they reflect back to you. A psychiatrist will use medication.
Okay. So Dr. Frank Jenga, is he a psychiatrist or a psychologist?
He's
or
a
both?
psychiatrist.
He's a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
So I remember there's a time he was on the bench with the K24 way back after 2007 PEV. I think it was around 2008 or 2009. I remember watching a show, and where he talked about the kind of traumas Kenyans have, societal traumas. Because we were talking about how in the Rift Valley, neighbors woke up, went and violated each other, whether it's the violence, burning each other's houses and farms and cattle and killing each other, shooting each other. People who at one point were living next to each other, wanaombana chumvi na sukari, and then now they unleash violence on each other ethnically. And then after all that violence, we never really addressed it as a nation. And he talked about how many so like you're going around the neighborhood and finding the people who are violating you.
Yeah.
Are your neighbors again, and you are not, and there are no consequences. So you have a society where there are no consequences. I don't know whether those people, the carjackers, were ever caught.
No. One, it's people that I didn't know. I didn't see their faces. So even if they were to be brought for a parade, then I wouldn't be able to. Yeah.
So we have so many traumas, and as a Kikuyu, although it's not, there's an assumption that Wangu Kanja is a Kikuyu because Kenyans are Mutemi Kiama have multiple ethnicities. Kamba, Giriama, Kikuyu, so the name cannot say it all. Kikuyus underwent a lot of violence during the independence struggle, especially those who didn't go. So the Mama went to the forests, and then the people who remained behind, women, children, and the elderly, were then put in villages or concentration camps. Then the men were taken to other concentration camps. And I came to learn that there were a lot of sexual violations against these women when they went to see their boyfriends or husbands in the camps, Manyani, Mwea, etc. Either they would be forced to have sex with their partners in that space, or they get pregnant, or they'll be violated by the guards. A lot of those guys later on joined the independence government and rose up to be very senior people in government. So that trauma of seeing the people who violated you in power, and I suspect that's part of the reason why we're not dealing with these issues, because the perpetrators actually became the people in power. I don't know whether that comes up in your conversations, in your work.
So that's one component. We also have childhood trauma that emanate from what your parents said. Because at times a parent will be insensitive and tell you, you will not amount to anything. Or can't you see your brother who's the last born and you're the firstborn? He's doing much better than you. So you will always try to work towards to prove your parents wrong. Even when they die, you'll still try to prove that you've made it, you're able to take care of your family. Whatever they said you don't have, you will have. So it's also small things that parents say to their children when they are growing up. The other thing is how parents interact in the homestead. If the two of you are always arguing, fighting each other physically or verbally, what you say to each other, how you interact with each other when you're trying to resolve problems. Also, children learn from that.
They learn from that. They pick it up as the way to deal with issues.
Yeah, and then also having in mind that different communities name their children differently. Like in Kikuyu, the firstborn, if it's a firstborn girl, they will be named the grandmother or the mother to the man, and vice versa. So also that creates a sense of the parents loves the people who are named after the dad's sides more than the mother's side. And also when it comes to who's doing better, also determines how they present the issues to the children. And also we are very fond of weni mjinga kama mama yako, weni mjinga kama baba yako. That by itself affects a child self-esteem as they grow up, and they tend to project it outward as they grow and become an adult. So you will see people striving, the next car I must have, the next house I must have. They're not even sitting down to take stock of the achievements that they've made this far, because they want to prove, even someone who's not alive, how they've done well for themselves.
They are competing with a shadow.
So we need to find a platform where we sit down and say there were violations that were done, historical, present, and hopefully we are not going to have future, but if you have any future violations, we have a mechanism that will help Kenyans
as a nation.
Not at Kikuyus peke yake ama Luos or
because
Taitas.
Abusers also become the abused also become abusers. And I think what part of what you're pointing out to at a family level is also, you said it earlier, that those who are violated are likely to violate others because that's how they were taught. And if this is so prevalent in our society and the desensitization around it, then it points to we having a lot of traumatized people who traumatize others, and then we normalize that traumatization.
Or even hurting people hurt others. So if you're not able to start your healing journey, and it doesn't, and this is where we go wrong as a community. We've stigmatized anyone who's going to seek any kind of mental health services to a point where we say that person is weak, they can't handle their business. Yet that structure helps you as an individual to digest hard conversations. So if you've lost someone, how do you move on after losing that person? If you've gone through a violation, how do you address the violation, but then also release that person and also integrate the violation into your day-to-day life? So any kind of counseling or mental health support structure is meant to help you to do that. Whether you're going for counseling, whether you're going for coaching, whether you're going for mentorship, it's supposed to get you out of the box that we've been put in, for you to be a free person and also start your healing journey. Because when you start your healing journey, you improve your quality of life, because then you're not going to be using coping mechanisms. You're going to be candid with all the conversations that you're having. You're going to look for information so that you can make informed decisions. The way you engage with your peers, your family members, the government of the day. Because you see, even as you go through our violations, you hold resentment towards the family, community, even the government of the day. Because the government has a responsibility to protect you as a Kenyan. But then if they fail, you feel that they did not meet their mandate as a government. Because we have structures that ensure that the Kenyan is safeguarded at the end of the day. We have mechanisms to improve the quality of life of a Kenyan. So if we are not working towards having structures that will make that happen for a Kenyan, then we need to interrogate and ask ourselves difficult questions. Because then what that translates to is this generation will come, the next generation will face the same challenges, this next generation, because we are not candid enough to have candid conversations.
Let me put you on the spot. Wangu Kanja is the Minister for Health, or Minister for Mental Health.
Yeah.
And you have one of the biggest programs that you want to introduce is around dealing with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
How would you structure, if you have the power and the resources, how would you shape, and I know these are difficult questions, what kind of national structure would you want to see to address these issues?
For me, the one thing that I would ensure that we have at the lowest level, that's the word level, is to make sure that we have mental health services available from that lower level, and then create...
What form would they take?
Counseling sessions, coaching.
So like a center in every village? Or
we can leverage on level the dispensaries at the ward level. Ensure that those dispensaries have the skill and expertise to offer mental health support services, because it boils on, do you have space? And if you have space, do you have personnel? And if you have personnel, do they have the right skills to offer those services? So for me, I would concentrate on mental health, but then also ensure we have at the same level, we have medical services provided, post-rep care medical services provided at that level, so that you don't walk for a long distance to be able to access those support services. Because you see, if the services are near you, we reduce the risk of HIV and AIDS, pregnancy and planned pregnancy. We'll reduce the risk of complicated medical conditions coming into play. Like we will prevent a lot, and then ensure that we leverage on the different university to market those two areas, medical and mental health. Ensure that we have more Kenyans being able and having the skills to provide those services. Right now, we've made an improvement on psychologists, psychiatrists, and psychotherapists who are providing mental health support services. But then they're not able. We are a nation that has 50 million plus citizens. So you can't say one counselor will have 1,000. We'll have we will have people burning out. So we need to get to a level we have one psychologist or psychotherapist having, let's say, 10 or 20 clients instead of 1,000. The way we have one police officer is equals 1,000, that's unhealthy. And then also looking at security, a very low-hanging fruit for this current government. We have gender desks. We have police officers who've been trained to handle cases of gender-based violence. So it's setting up a unit. If we can set up a water unit, what stops us to set up a sex crimes unit, a special crimes unit that will handle...
I've heard people complain about those gender desks, like they are violated when they go report these cases.
Again,
it's not prevalent, is it?
So they are there are gender desks that are functional, there are gender desks that are not functional. But the reason why I'm saying we stop focusing on the gender desk is we set up a unit and then align all the
Specialized police unit that deals with that issue.
Yeah, and then align all the police officers that have been trained or have been working on this gender desk to the unit. Then that way you have sustainability, you have people investing in the structure, and then you have more. It becomes a lucrative venture for other police officers, because right now the way they view gender desk is that they won't get promotion, so why should I work at the gender desk?
Well, the few cases I've had is of gender desk being manned by women, first of all, and then when a man goes and reports that they've been violated, and then like mwanaume kama wewe unachapa na mwanamke, or something like that, or
because then it goes back to, if we are able to set up a specialized unit, now professionalism comes into play. So how do I approach you? How do I interview you? What language am I going to use?
Empathy also.
Empathy. So you can't use demeaning language to an individual who's gone through a traumatic experience. You need to use words that are encouraging and empathize with that person. So by having that, then it means we are able to provide professional and personalized services. Like, I am quite sure if we sat down with the current government, we can identify low-hanging fruits that they are able to align and invest in without using too many resources.
Are you making any policy proposals to them? Do you have an opportunity to interact with the government? Have you had an opportunity?
Yes, we have. But then also it requires the highest office to actually listen to you, because we have a lot of gatekeeping. And then the gatekeeping, you have layers of people to talk to before you get to the highest office. For me, for us as a country to address sexual violence comprehensively, the president must come out clearly and articulate himself by saying that he does not condone, justify, or rationalize any form of violence.
That means you'd have to fire some people in his cabinet.
If it calls for that, so that he builds the trust and gains the trust of the public, and the public are the ones who have employed him, and everyone else. If you are the president, deputy president, women rep, MP, MCA, you are employed by Kenyans. So work for the Kenyans that have given you that vote. Work for the Kenyan who have actually paid taxes for you to be in those offices. They're the ones who are paying your salary. So assume if you don't work for the Kenyan, and all of them are not able to go to work because they have mental health issues, all of them are not able to earn anything because businesses have closed down because of high cost of living, all of them, they're not able to work because they've gone through a violation and they have numerous injuries. What does that translate to? You don't have anyone to pay your taxes, so you don't have a salary. You don't have anyone to vote for you because of all of them are bedridden or they are suffering a mental health issue.
Mental breakdowns.
Yeah. So we safeguard the Kenyan. We work for the Kenyan. We improve the Kenyan so that they can have quality, the quality of life that we achieve or we want to achieve moving forward.
So you've talked about the dispensary with a psychiatrist, psychologist, and then competent staff, a space allocated to handle these issues. We talked about a police unit that is trained, not just a general desk. What about the rescue space? What would you like to see across the country for the survivors?
At least every sub-county to have a shelter or a safe space, but then we we qualify who are the beneficiaries to be in those safe spaces. Because we can say, let's say Kamkunji will have a shelter that will take care of trafficking. Then Dagoretti will have domestic violence, and then Embakasi will have a shelter for survivors of sexual violence. So in every constituency, let's have a shelter, but then we demarcate what kind of beneficiaries are going to what shelters, so that we don't lump them up in the same shelter. And then also we can break it down further to safe spaces where we have men or women and the ones that take care of children. So then also we don't lump women, men and children under the same roof, because then there's also a possibility of violations happening in the shelter if you're not clear who your beneficiaries are and how you end up disaggregating them or placing them in the different shelters. And then also we can have spaces that people come for mentorship, for creativity. Even art centers can be safe spaces, because people are coming to express their anger, their resentment. As part of therapy. To express their anger, resentment, and whatever emotions that they've built up over time. We also need to set up or collect a pool of lawyers to support survivors, especially when they are going to court. We put so much focus on the perpetrator. We deny survivors information, legal services, or even pro bono services, legal services. We deny them an opportunity to understand what happens through the criminal justice system. Because if you come to me and I'm able to give you information and manage your expectation and tell you, this is what we need to do and this is how long it's going to take. So from this level, we are going to go to this level, and this is what is happening here, and then we go to the next level. If you explain to someone that way, then they might make a decision to stay throughout the process. Even if it's going to take 10 years, you've already managed the expectation. And also tell them or inform them the disadvantage of not pursuing justice. Because then what you're saying is that the person can continue violating other people. And I think one of the things we need to do as a country, we keep on saying human rights violations with a focus on sexual violence, because that's what I focus on. It's a crime against the state. But then in the absence of the complainant, the case does not continue. It's concluded.
Our justice system is complainant based.
Yeah, but you have said the crime is against the state. So even in the absence of the complainant, because you have all the evidence, you have the documentation, the case must continue and must move forward. Assume the person dies. So will we say that we are not going to hold this person accountable?
Have you explored this with them? For example, organizations like Katiba Institute that do public interest litigation. I don't know they've had conversations with them. Yeah, we've had not only with CSO organizations, but then also we've had this same conversation with the judiciary, with different individuals. As in, every day we endeavor. DPP? All those. We endeavor to inform and educate the different mechanisms that we have in place to make sure that at the end of the day, whatever interventions that you're putting in place, they are in the best interest of the survivor. They are trauma informed, because that's the only way we will help people understand sexual violence, trends, patterns, the dynamics that comes with it. Because you see, this is the one violation that you have 3 pillars of support services. You have health, you have security, you have justice. And under these 3 pillars, you have other government departments. So you need to bring them together to support this individual.
And if you are unable to bring these institutions together, then it becomes
Are they working
difficult.
together as we speak?
No, everyone is doing their own thing, and that's sad. And that's why I'm saying the most top office, which is the office of the president, needs to acknowledge that for us to be able to address sexual violence comprehensively, he needs to convene all these departments together to avoid re-traumatization. Because if I go to health and they do an intake or they do a medical report, they will interview me. If I go to security, that's National Police Service, they will interview me. If I go to judiciary, they will interview me. So every step of the way, I'm being re-traumatized over and over again. How do we come together and consolidate this process and maybe use one document to collect all the data or all the information that is required to help this person
So you don't have
access
to go through
justice?
this step every time.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a case where a father was abusing the mother and then also abusing the children. And I'm like, what kind of care these kids were taken out of that situation, but the mother could not. You said she was in her days. So what kind of care do these kids get? Do you have systems, governmental or otherwise, that are able to address the kind of trauma they've gone through?
Yeah, we have children, they're called out CCIs, children charitable institutions. But then for children to have quality of life, what civil society organizations are advocating for, especially the ones who are working with children, is to do away with the institutions. Any child has a guardian somewhere, whether it's an uncle, a cousin, or something. So they need to be taken back to homes, like family to adopt them, or even individuals to adopt them. So they are doing away with the institutions that take in children. And I'm in agreement because we need to.
That's a government policy.
Civil society organizations are actually doing that, and it's a government policy to be able to like reduce the number of institutions or even shut down all of them so that children can go back to homes, to families and their homes.
Family care.
Yeah. And then we increasingly try to set up shelters that are specific, not because a child has been abandoned, but as a child has gone through a violation and they need to be put up in a safe space as the case is going on, because there is a likelihood of a person being bonded and coming back to the community as the case is proceeding in court. So how do we set up those safe spaces to ensure that we can facilitate that? And then also for rehabilitation. For adults must give you consent. Even reporting, an adult must give you consent, not unless it's a vulnerable person who's an adult and they are being violated and you know of it and they're unable to do anything about it. That's when now you as an adult, you will come forth and help them to report. The
Constitution allows you to intervene on behalf of those you feel like they can't intervene for themselves.
Yeah. For example, an elderly person who's in their 80s, they're bedridden and they're sexually violated, we have the responsibility to come and report that on their behalf. Yeah.
So my other question is about you. Dealing with survivors means you're also relieving their pain and your pain every other time. How do you take care of Wangu? How do you take care of your own mental health? Because we talk about how most activists, because it's what you do is also part of another form of activism.
Yeah.
I know there's no one taking care of them or us when we find ourselves dealing with the most traumatizing issues of our society and traumatize people. And that, I think, also traumatizes us. How do you take care of Wangu? How do you cope?
So one is to identify a support mechanism that is working for you. For me, I'll call a friend and express my frustration and anger. And then thereafter, I will look for now a professional to go and sit down with them and go through counseling sessions or coaching sessions, depending with what is comfortable with you. Not everyone likes going for counseling, but you have the option for exploring with coaching. And then also self-care, time out. You're not on call 24/7, 365, because then if you want to help more people, you have to look after yourself so that you can be able to look after other people. And then you need to get to a point where you understand your body, you understand the way trauma presents or impacts you and your body. Because if you're not careful, then you'll just end up having secondary trauma or going into depression. Because you see, it calls for a lot of investment, especially financial. So if we don't have money under Wangu Kanja Foundation to support someone, you might feel guilty, you might feel like obligated, I must do this. But you need to acknowledge that at times you might not be able to help everyone. And if you acknowledge that, then it becomes easier to even say no. Because you see, for us, we get all forms of gender-based violence coming to survivors of gender-based violence coming to our offices. But then at some point, we need to get to help people understand that our main focus is on sexual violence, not all forms of gender-based violence, because then that also can be overwhelming. And by helping people to understand that then you reduce the impacts of secondary trauma to me as Wangu, but also to the staff under Wangu Kanja Foundation. And everyone has an opportunity under Wangu Kanja Foundation, everyone has an opportunity to go for supervision. If you get to a point where you are realizing you've burnt out or you're burning out, you go to a person to do supervision. And supervision is more or less than like counseling. And organizing for taking leave, going on vacation, engaging in something different so that...
Are you able to totally shut it out? Like,
Yeah,
like
there are
take
times
leave,
I
go
get
on
to
holiday.
the house and I don't leave the house on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and my phone is like on the table upside down so that I don't see calls coming in, because then you are tempted. If someone calls you, you're tempted to. And the other thing is to set up mechanisms that will ensure that, one, you are helping people in the right way. So like right now, not unless a person is referred to me personally, most of the calls come through the office. We have a toll-free line specific for survivors of sexual violence. And that's what we are marketing and branding and publicizing, so that not all cases are coming through me, apart from one or two referrals that will be given my number to be able to do that. But then I don't do all the intakes. We have the psychologist and we have a paralegal in the office. I delegate. When I receive cases, I delegate to them for them to do the intakes. So also spreading the risks to different individuals and to different institutions. If we are unable to handle something, we acknowledge that we don't have the capacity and refer accordingly to the right institution. So it's also coming to a realization that you might not have all the answers. Yeah.
I think that's humbling also, knowing that there are cases that you'll not be able to address. And I think being able to, maybe, can I call it compartmentalize some of these things. So as we wrap up, one of the purpose of this show is to actually reach the upcoming generation. And you said you hope that the next generation will not be traumatized like the past generations have been. What would be your message to educators and to the young people who will watch these podcasts in terms of dealing with issues of sexual violence, and especially intimate partner violence, which is teenagers usually are not able to cope with this. They're in a space where peer pressure, peer approval is very important. How do we start addressing and dealing with this and being open with these issues, and where would they seek help or counsel if they need it?
Okay. So the first thing is to actually, I think as a community, we need to acknowledge and identify safe spaces where we can have conversations with the youth, the teenagers and children. Because we are in denial. As a country, we are in denial that our children are engaging in sex at a very young age. So we need to acknowledge that. And after acknowledging, we need to start putting mechanisms. And I don't understand the reason why, as Kenya, we've not embraced sex education in schools. We are not teaching children how to have sex. All we are doing is giving them information to make informed decisions. So if we bury our heads in the sand, what that translates to is you don't share information with children. There's a likelihood of children getting information from the wrong people or from the wrong places. And
I think almost every teenager nowadays has a smartphone.
Yeah. So even as we are saying that we have to preach abstain in schools, back home, every children is either in front of a gadget, a TV, or they have access to magazines. So what are they reading in these magazines?
I remember there's a podcast I watched just a few weeks ago. My friend Odwell Jagero was interviewing Dr. Makovewala. And she talked about how she has a teenage son, and she got all the devices away from him to I think to get him to either focus on his classwork and that kind of thing, and then organized a space where a counselor could have a conversation with him and boys his age. And she discovered that, according from the counselor told them, your son is watching porn.
Yeah.
Despite not having devices,
because one, we have sleepovers. Two, children are going to spending their time, a lot of time, either in schools or churches or social halls or playgrounds. You can take the device away from your daughter or son, but then where they are spending time, their peers having the gadgets. Yes. So you can't take away all the gadgets because some parents will not even agree to that. So the best thing as a society is to actually start having these conversations early. And I think parents, both men and women, need to step up. Women have stepped up for a while, but then men are not doing the same. So we have that power imbalance when it comes to women are taking the mantle to meet with young women, having conversations with them, mentoring them, coaching them. But then we are not seeing a similar effort towards.
So men need to counsel the young men, or the boys, as
they need to work with them. I know there are efforts. There are certain institutions that have have come up with many initiatives, but then we need to have more, so that we can balance out and have a balance. As let's say 10,000 girls are being mentored by women, we are having 10,000 boys being mentored by men. And the reason why I'm saying this is, as we spend more time on gadgets, or children spend more time on gadgets, texting, that's how people express themselves, through text. if they're unable to have a conversation with you, it becomes difficult. Because if I read a statement and you read the same statement, whatever I understand is not what you will understand. So for us is to get to a point where to acknowledge that even as we have technology and these are the medium of communication that are there, we need personalized
one-on-one interaction.
With the children, with the youth, with the adolescents. And then we stop this business of saying teenage pregnancies. They're not teenage. Have we interrogated you? We are saying Vihiga has 20,000 teenage pregnancies. One, we are rationalizing a violation. It's called, for me, we need to call it child pregnancies, not children pregnancies, because we want to desensitize people by giving it a lesser.
Teenage is more acceptable than
child pregnancy. And then once we've acknowledged these things are happening and we need to address them, then it becomes easier to put mechanisms in place. Why are we having 20,000 children pregnancies in Vihiga? Who are these individuals who are impregnating them? Are they their peers or are they adults? And if it's adult, then we need to hold these adults accountable. If it's their peers, we need to have sex education talks with them to make sure that they don't get pregnant again, but then also the boys do not impregnate again, because there's a consequence to that. We need also to have conversations around boundaries. Girls, every individual, whether you are a man, woman, or child, you have boundaries. So respecting people's boundaries. And it boils down to this whole conversation here, kula fair. I keep on asking individuals, if I'm sending you money, have I given you terms and conditions of how that money is supposed to be spent? Or have I told you the reason why I'm sending you the money?
My expectations.
Your expectations at the end of the day. So I'm sending you money so that I can have sexual relationships with you. I'm spending you money so that we can come and hang out. So that at the end of the day, I'm making an informed decision. If I come, I know this is what you expect. But most of the time, we send money and then we start blaming people that nilimtumia 5 sok, amekuwa akikula pesa yangu, sasa ataniona. But you didn't disclose your expectations from the onset. You need to articulate your terms of engagement whenever you do something. Even if you pay my school fees, tell me, what do you want from me? What do you expect of me as you pay my school fees? Because I think you've seen these incidents where men pay for their wives or girlfriends' education with the expectation that you're going to marry me or we are going to be in a lifelong relationship, only for the woman or man who's been paid for school fees to accomplish what they wanted to achieve and get into another relationship and move on.
Yeah.
So the person who has been paying school fees gets offended and now starts threatening or abuses the person physically.
Where they started doing this, there was no conversation as to this is the expectation, this is why I'm doing this.
Yeah, and then also you need to articulate it. Even if you have expectations, please verbally articulate the expectations so that the person can also make an informed decision. The other thing is, at times, saa zingine tunafanya kazi ya kanisa. Tenda wema, nenda zako. So if you want to help someone, stop putting they're called what? Expectations or demands on an individual. Because things change. You might have started and they agree to a certain condition, but then as time goes by, things change. And that expectation might not be met. So you need to revisit and keep on asking and also managing your expectations in the process. So I think we need as a country, we need to have candid conversations, especially around sex, sexuality, and sexual violence, so that we can work towards prevention, but also reduce the risks of these violations. And going back to what are we doing? Those are the things that we are championing for us to be more open to having conversations. I would love to have or someone to set up a blog, a monologue, whatever medium of communication around issues of sex, sexuality, and sexual violence, because that's the only way we can reduce sexually transmitted infection, HIV and AIDS, unplanned pregnancies, children pregnancies. All those things can be addressed in a forum that is conducive and also informative for Kenyans to understand. If this happens, these are the consequences. Because going back to, there was a study that was done by National Gender and Equality Commission in 2016. The economic burden on survivors of sexual violence is 46 billion shillings annually. That's money that can run 3 counties for a whole year.
That's actually, each county gets an average of 6 billion. So it's actually more counties.
More counties.
Wow.
And
where is this money going?
Medical counseling, transport from court to court, from hospital to home, reconstructive surgery, and any other, like medication, buying medication where people need to keep on buying. Let's say if in the process you get a disability, there are certain things that you will now becomes a norm in your life, that you have to get certain either medication or certain equipments. So by us making survivors spend these 46 billion shillings annually, we are not working towards the sustainable development goals, well-being, no poverty. We're actually making survivors more poorer. Because if I had a piece of land and my family does not have money to support me, what will I do? I will have to sell the piece of land so that I can pay for my rehabilitation, or a member of the family will spend their profits to support me.
Or their savings,
Yeah. So we are taking away from survivors and not allowing them to invest in themselves or their families, or even education, in businesses, or in whatever venture they would want to invest in. So we need to work towards prevention.
So to build a national infrastructure towards prevention, education and awareness, especially for young people, so that the next generation can be in a better place. Invest as a country towards, as you said, a healthy society then is able to pay taxes. I always wonder why we have a society that traumatizes us and yet they expect us to pay taxes, instead of taking care of our well-being.
Yeah. So we need to work towards ensuring that every Kenyan can get the quality of life they deserve. Yeah.
Well, that's been quite an informative conversation, Wangu. I think I'm much more informed. I hope those who will watch and listen to this podcast will also get to appreciate the field you work in.
Yeah.
What if someone wants to maybe contact you as Wangu Kanja Foundation? How would they contact you?
So we have a toll-free line, especially for anyone who has gone through a violation. The toll-free line is 1519. And then if you
just dial 1519 with any
Safaricom or Airtel line, and the call is free. If you want to reach out to our offices, 0722 790 404. For social media platforms, Twitter handle Wangu Kanja F, and then Instagram and Facebook Wangu Kanja Foundation. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I hope very few people will reach you because there will be less violations.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story, and we hope we can continue having more conversations around the work that you do and what your organization is proposing. And maybe by the time we have the next conversation, the government will have taken up your challenge.
Yeah.
And maybe
I'm
the
hoping
president
so.
will be addressing the issues that you've raised.
Yeah.
So asante sana and tumeshukuru.
Thank you for hosting me.
Asante.
Yeah.
Welcome.